Welcome to the Recovery Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Abassi. I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic and stroke survivor. And last night, on the last day of January, because this is how I function and always have my entire life, I finished the both the intro to my memoir and chapter one. So it's the first draft, and I recognize that I'm supposed to make multiple drafts and or just keep editing it and stuff, but I'm elated that I finished, and that was my goal for January. Actually, my goal was to finish chapter one, and when I sat down to start at the beginning of January, I realized that I have an intro. Being the overachiever that I am, I thought, well, my goal is to finish chapter one. That means I need to finish the intro first. I also have read or like doing research on how to write something like this, like a big project like this, that you don't have to write it in order. So, I don't know. I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants, and I just feel really good so far that I got to complete that. So, yay. I hope that if you have chosen to um, complete a large project of your own this year, along with me, whether it be writing, journaling, writing your own memoir, or doing something like that, I hope that you were able to achieve your goal this month, last month, that is. And if you have not yet considered joining me in completing a big goal this year, think about it. It has been really cathartic to start spending that kind of time on the different memories. Like, I realize that I do that here, but for me, it is so different to write the stuff down than to talk about it, because one thing I really enjoy, and I've always enjoyed this, which I think is why I wrote poetry and why I enjoyed poetry for so long, and it's getting me back into feeling like I want to maybe write some poetry again. That would be crazy if I started doing that in sobriety, because it was a drunk thing for me. But one thing that I realized is how much, um, not relief, enjoyment, satisfaction I get from choosing the perfect word to describe something that's going on either between my ears or in my heart. I really enjoy that. So, um, it's been nice. I think this project this year is going to be really healing for me. So today, the morning topic was it was a daily reflection because it's Saturday. Daily reflection, and what I heard this morning was about step two. It was about coming to believe. Like, when did I start coming to believe in a higher power? And I'm not going to necessarily talk about step two today. I'm not necessarily even going to center too much on coming to believe or when did I start to trust? But I think it is a good opening for the topic that started to resonate with me this morning, and that is about being receptive, noticing what's going on around me, and not holding on to the past. That's really where my head went today. And I think it did start, all of it starts with the steps for me in my life, in my sobriety program. And even if you are not an alcoholic, and I know at least, oh, I mean, I know a lot of you are not, and it's amazing to me that you listen because, and that's what I wanted this podcast to help with is or I wanted people to be open to seeing that sobriety is just my situation. You know, sobriety is my story, but the steps that I've learned and the application of the principles of my sobriety program um, apply to everything in my life. It doesn't apply to just not picking up a drink. That's not what sobriety is. And if you give it a chance and you listen, um, you are able to see that this podcast, although I reference sobriety all the time, I reference stroke recovery all the time, it's really about learning how to live period. Learning how to live with yucky, difficult stuff. And that's what life is. It's yucky, difficult stuff sometimes. And yesterday I had a little bit of an ugly cry on the episode. But I didn't watch it back, but it felt ugly on my face. But it was good and I needed it. And it didn't have anything to do with drinking. It had to do with depression and what that felt like for me because I was writing about it in my memoir this week. Um, so that's what really the podcast is about, even though I reference my personal difficulties. And it seems that the feedback I'm getting is that it resonates anyway. And I'm really flattered that you choose to listen. I am. I have a friend of mine that was like, my first friend. I think she was my first friend and my longest friend of my life. And her and I, hi, if you're listening, I don't say names, so I'm not allowed to say your name, unless you give me permission. But she is listening to my podcast. She started recently and is listening, I think, all the way through. And that is just number one, that's dedication because we have hundreds of them. And two, I feel like that is love. You know, it's love for me. It's love for yourself to want to listen and try to apply the stuff that I'm talking about to your own life. So, gosh, I'm just really flattered about all of it. So when did I start to believe? When did I start to trust? And you lifetime listeners might know what moment that is. I'll give you a moment to think about. What is the moment in my life where I really began to believe and trust in my higher power? Giving you a second. Okay, time's up. It was when I was in San Francisco. And I was walking around the block of my hotel, and I just kept walking around and around, afraid to stop because if I stopped, I was afraid I was going to drink because I kept saying to myself, nobody's going to know. Nobody's going to know. And then I stopped in my tracks and I was like, that's not true. I'm going to know. And my higher power is going to know. And at that moment, um, I was trusting. I was believing. Um, and it hasn't swayed for me. Um, I have self-doubt sometimes, a lot of times, but my trust and my connection, my belief has remained. I have to work at it every day because sometimes I'm like, I don't know. I don't know about this whole God thing. Or I mean, my higher power is like a good idea, but um when that after that moment happened and my ability to I'm trying to think of what the word is. It's like I was all of a sudden, and it was all of a sudden that I realized it, but it was a connection that I was working on. And once I experience something once, I've mentioned this, like once I'm able to be sober through my first wedding or something, I know that I can do it. I know I've done it before, I can do it again. Well, that's the same thing with this belief and trust thing. Is I was alone and I thought nobody's gonna know. Wait a minute. Yes, I will know and my higher power will know. And it kept me from drinking once, a very, very important once. And ever since then, I can reflect back on that and say, my trust and my faith in my higher power helped me once. So I know I can do it again. And because of that, I'm more aware. I'm waiting for that for for I'm trying to find the right words. For I'm waiting to notice that happen again. I'm present and self-aware enough that I can expect that connection to happen again. Because that's what it was for me. It was a connection that happened in a moment. And it was like this that I stopped and I was like, no, my higher power will know. If I'm all in, this is it. This is where the rubber meets the road. And so I'm self-aware and I can almost cultivate that connection. Sometimes it happens when I don't expect it, because that's what happened the first time when I was in San Francisco. I didn't expect to have some sort of epiphany or something like that. I wasn't expecting that connection to come to the surface and that faith to come to the surface and be something so powerful as to be stronger than my own will, stronger than my own willpower. And so I know that at unexpected times now that can happen, that connection can be stronger than my own willpower. So I feel like I articulated that in the way that it feels. Yesterday, I you recall yesterday I told you that my neighbor who I had connected with a few months ago who had cancer passed away. And everybody was in her family was outside, her children and other family members were outside. They were getting ready to I guess go to the funeral burial. It was for me because I'm not from their background, that they had actually carried her casket out of the house. Um, and it was in almost like a self-constructed casket Like that's what it looked like. Yes, I was looking out the window, which my husband was like, I don't think we should be staring out the window. I'm like, they're not looking up here. Anyway, so I told you guys that that happened. Well, yesterday I was walking Boris down to the mailbox, and I was walking down the middle of the street, which I don't do very often. I'm usually walking on the sidewalk, but I live in this like tiny little cul-de-sac, so it's fine to walk down the street. There's no cars. And we were walking down the street, and I stopped. I stopped in this spot in the middle of the street. And I don't know why I stopped. I'm trying to remember. I looked back or something at her house, and then I looked down and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I am standing smack in the spot that I met her." Because when I met her, I was walking Autumn, and I was walking up the street on the sidewalk. And no, I wasn't. I was walking in the middle of the street again. So I guess maybe I do walk in the middle of the street on that road. I was walking in the middle of the street, and she was on the sidewalk, and she crossed over and met me in the middle of the street. And it was in that spot. And that's where she met me. And she asked me where elections were, and I told her it's at the school right next door, right on the road beside ours, at the school beside our neighborhood. And she asked me if I would walk with her over there and help her. And I said, yeah. So anyway, although it's just call it a coincidence that I was standing that in that exact spot, that I stopped in that exact spot. Um, I like to think that it wasn't a coincidence. I like to think that it was a connection. And that's the kind of stuff that happens when I'm open to it, when I'm able to, when I'm able to put aside all of my stuff and notice what's going on around me. That stuff didn't happen until I cleared out what I call my dark space, dark place. Um, and that required the steps, all the steps. And that's when I started to be able to notice. I think, like in retrospect, I think that all of those things, those coincidences, those God winks, as some people call it in my program, those serendipities, like I believe that those were always there, that they were always available to me, but I didn't notice them because I was so closed off. I was in my own head. Um, I mentioned last night when I was writing was it was like a film had developed between me and the rest of the world. And you could be standing right in front of me, but I couldn't connect with you. There was like this film that protected me. I couldn't touch you. I couldn't really listen to you. No matter how much we were loving each other or friends or listening to one another, there was this layer of wall, be it very thin, that was between me and you, that was between me and everything around me. And I just didn't notice. I was I was too focused inward to be aware of the people around me, much less um, the pain or experiences or joy, anything that was happening with the people around me. I could see it clearly because it was just a film. I could see right through it, but I couldn't connect. And now that I've taken away the alcohol, um, you know what it's like, take away the alcohol and don't work the steps. That film is removed, but it's like an open wound. You know, I can reach you, you can reach me, but it hurts if you touch me. Um, and that's why I needed the steps in order um, to, I guess, feel alive and feel healthy and finally find a serenity, a place where I can go in my head where there is nothing wrong. And that has taken a lot of practice. You know, my friend yesterday reached out to me, and I just love it. She reached out to me and said that she has had a difficult time being sold on meditation. And I get it. I mean, me too. I just sat there and I'm like, nothing's happening. What's supposed to happen? And that's the thing, is that nothing's supposed to happen. Um, we, the more that we can sit there and nothing happens, we become okay with nothing happening. We begin to become okay with silence. And that's when serenity started to unfold for me. When I was able to, when I wasn't quiet or silent, I was working on myself. I was clearing away the old junk, clearing away the painful stuff, clearing away the stuff that just sat in my gut and I could never let it go. Um, Clearing away that stuff so that when I did get to practice sitting in silence, which they call meditation. I mean, don't call it meditation if you don't want to. It doesn't have to be called that. You can call it just getting still. And when I was able to, in tandem with the work, get still, then I was able to be more self-aware. It's it's a self-awareness that can only happen when it's quiet, when there aren't any distractions. There's so much, there's a whole world inside of us, you know, it's almost like there's a whole other life that's being lived inside my head. And it's very different than the life that's being lived outside of my head. And if I can get still and quote unquote meditate, whatever you want to call it, um, for me, I just call it meditation because that makes sense to me, what people say meditation is. And when I'm able to, I keep losing my train of thought. If you haven't noticed it, then good. But I did. Um, when I'm able to get quiet like that, I can start connecting that inner world that's happening, that inner life that I'm living, I can draw the line to the world around me and kind of start to make them happen together. And that's what being present is for me. This morning somebody mentioned that the past is always moving further and further away from us. Um, we are like, my job is to stay present. My job is to try to continue to keep the life that I'm living inside my head connected with the life that's going on around me. That's my job. And that is the only way I can do that, is to stay present, stay in the here and now, stay in the moment, in the day. And when I don't do that, and I don't allow my higher power to handle the things that are going on in that life inside my head, like, I'm living that life inside my head that's telling me all kinds of stories, that voice inside my head telling me all kinds of stories. It's playing out every single scenario. I mean, it's like multiple lives are being lived inside my head. Every scenario that could possibly happen in every situation is happening inside my head. And if I can practice getting quiet, getting still, meditating, and handing that stuff over, which is simply, for me, recognizing that I don't have control. I can I can try to play out every scenario possible, but I don't have control over any of them. And when I stop trying to hold on to those things, and typically it is in the past for me. Typically it's in the past. In stroke recovery, there's been a lot more in the future, that a lot of more of that fear of the future that's happening, but focusing on not holding on to the past, what I could have done in this situation, or playing out the scenarios that may happen next in the future. When I can stop holding on to that, um, I can find that alignment, that can, I don't want to keep using the word connection, but that's the one that's coming to mind, that connection between what's going on up here and what's going on in the world around me. I'm letting go of all of those multiple lives that are being lived, and I'm staying in just the one, that where my body is. So what I thought of it as is, I tend to tie a rope around things that happened in the past, and I hold on to it with dear life so that I can stay connected to it. Um, and a lot of times, those things that I've tied a rope around and I'm holding on to it, and man, I'm holding on to a lot of ropes from my past, and I'm holding on to all of them. And really, they're just giving me rope burn on my hand because I'm holding on so tightly. I'm white knuckling them. And all it does is cause me pain. Why do I do that? I don't know. What it made me think about this morning is these plane crashes that have happened the past 2 days. The one of American Airlines and the Hawk helicopter at Reagan National Airport in DC, and the Learjet in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I When I hear about something so terrible, I tend to put myself in one of the seats on the plane. Um, my neighbor who passed away recently, I put myself in her hospital bed, and that is me tying a rope around something and holding on to it. I don't know why I do it, because it's so painful. I'm working on figuring out how to have empathy and compassion without it being unhealthy for me. How can I extend help and condolences and that kind of thing without entering into this alternative life that's going on in my head where I'm on the plane or I'm in the hospital bed? It's not helping the victims. It's not helping the victims' families, and it's not helping me. But I do it. I do it every time. And this time, I have been forcing myself to not get on the plane, to not be sitting next to those children that were on the plane because it hurts. Um, but there's a part of me that feels like if I don't do that, I'm not honoring them the way that they should be honored. I'm not grieving for them to the extent that they deserve to be grieved. And that's just not true. Um, it's just not true. Experiencing that sort of like putting myself in their shoes is not grieving. It's not compassion. It's not condolences. It's not healthy empathy. Um, and I'm working on it. And I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to just mention it because it's a challenge for me. And I know that I'm not unique. I know that I'm not unique because I've talked to my mom even, who shared with me that she has a lot of that over empathy as well. Sorry to talk about you, Mom. Hi, I love you. But a lot of us have over empathy. And those of us who do, I think, tend to be more vulnerable to depression. Um, it reminds me of a poem that I wrote. How interesting is that? That I've been thinking so much about the poetry, but I wrote a poem about a young girl who got on one of those rides at an amusement park where you stand up against the wall and it's a circle, one of those circle things that spin, and it spins really fast and it sucks you up against the wall and then the floor drops out so that you're just held there up against the wall as it spins. And there was a young girl that I had heard about in the news, and this was in my 20s, okay? And it's still in my head. Um, she had a heart attack or something like that. I believe it was a heart attack, but again, it's been 30 years and since this story. And I wrote a poem about it. And that poem, I am her. I'm on the ride. And that is so unhealthy. It's so unhealthy, but I do it. I do it over and over again. Um, so it's something I like to work on. Yeah. Um, and I can't enjoy the present when I'm holding on to those ropes because they're just pulling on me. I'm just, it's this counteraction, it's like this gravity that's pulling me towards the past when I want to stay in the present, but I don't know how. I can't enjoy the present. I can't enjoy the new. um, the things that are around me, I can't notice them if I'm so focused on holding on to those ropes. So I'm going to work on that. And thanks for listening today. Thanks for showing up for yourself and for me. And I will talk to you tomorrow.